All right. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Pain to Profits. I'm your host, Samson Jagoras, and every single week we're bringing on entrepreneurs to help you guys save time and level up on your entrepreneurial journey. And today I'm sitting down with Clint Fiore. Is that how you say your last name?
Fiore.
Fiore.
Yeah.
I got to work on my Italian. Is it Italian?
It is. Yep.
Okay. I should know better. I'm an Alfano and a Jagoras. So I got a lot of Mediterranean in me. But Clint runs a company called Bison Business. He also owns several businesses. He's in the world of M&A. He's a heck of a Twitter follow. So if you don't follow him on Twitter, I guess we can't call it Twitter anymore. If you don't follow him on x.com, then you probably should. But more importantly, he's a man of God. He's got a beautiful family, and he loves to fly. And so we're going to get into all that today on the podcast. But without further ado, Clint, man, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Samson. Glad to be here.
Hey, yeah, you bet, man. Well, you just celebrated your 40th birthday. You got a lot of years. You got a lot of years under your belt. But who are you, and how'd you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so 40 years is a double up for me because I almost died at 20 years old, and it's kind of a special birthday for me because I feel like I've now lived to double the life of what I deserved because I kind of miraculously survived the plane crash when I was 20 years old, and that was a big part of my life journey and kind of formed a lot of my life philosophies. Was just kind of the lessons I learned from a near-death experience. But yeah, today I am a leader of a company called Bison Business, and we help people buy and sell companies. My life story is kind of like went to school to become a pro pilot, decided eventually not to do that, to go into sales and marketing instead. And then went into angel-backed startups for a few years, and then business brokerage and M&A. I've been doing that for the past eight and a half years or so. And so today I live in Central Texas, married with 4 kids, beautiful family, kind of a homebody, but I just love teaching and helping people on their entrepreneurial journeys, kind of buy businesses, sell businesses, which is such an awesome option I wasn't aware of when I first started on my journey. And I just love helping buyers and sellers turn that next chapter of their life. And I've built a team and a process to help people do that with more transparency, more efficiency, a little bit more of a high-tech touch than a lot of my competition in business brokerage. And that formula has worked really well for us for the past 8 years.
So we're going to get into that, but you can't just throw the hook out there that I almost died in a plane crash and not talk about that. And the fact that you still are an avid pilot. Can we just talk about that for a little bit? You got to tell that story.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take our whole podcast if we let it.
Let's not go. Yeah, we don't need to go too far, but you can't throw that out there and not say something about it.
Yeah, I mean, I was a student at Embry-Riddle, which is the #1 aviation school. I was all gung-ho about becoming a pro pilot. About halfway through my schooling, I was flying a solo flight to Nevada and back around northern northern Arizona, sorry. And basically ended up in a tough situation without the long story short was I was going from a low elevation area to a higher elevation area, had to clear a mountain range, got on the wrong side of a downdraft on a lee side of a mountain range, and ended up losing performance, trying to escape out of this mountain range, made a wrong turn, and ended up in a dead-end box canyon, which is pretty much deadly. Like you're gonna die. And I was looking at my demise with wide open eyes saying like, wow, I didn't know I was going to die today. Flew the plane down the canyon as far as I could. And then at the last moment made a left-hand turn into the left canyon wall, brought the nose up as high as I could right before I impacted the canyon. And the plane was absolutely annihilated, just totally destroyed. I remember hearing the sound, and I don't remember what happened next. I just remember I opened my eyes and I'm on the ground outside the plane. No time had passed because there's still fuel spilling out of the plane. The the tail's hanging off, the engine cowling's 50 feet away up the mountain. All the engine instruments are broken. There's a boulder that came through the floor where my legs were, so it's like the rudder pedals are gone. And there's just a giant rock through the floor. The plane just hit and stuck. I thought it was going to tumble down the mountain, but it just kind of pancaked onto this canyon wall. I stood up and brushed myself off and discovered I didn't have a scratch on my whole body. And
Wow.
the it was nothing short of a miracle, because I did my best to crash the best way. I was making it up as I go.
Right.
I
First
was
time being in the situation.
yeah, I'm a Texan, and I've learned to fly in flatlands. Didn't have mountain experience, and that was, I think, why I didn't recognize what was going on until it was too late. And and yeah, I think it was God just showing off, that saving me from myself. And it was a very dramatic experience. I was in the middle of nowhere. I hiked to the top of the nearest peak, and thankfully I was mobile, because my plane's like way down in this canyon, and you couldn't see it really from the air unless you were just right over it. And I'm in this landscape that looks like Mars. It's just the northwest corner of Arizona. There's nothing out there, and steep, jagged, rocky mountains everywhere you look. It's November 29th. I'm at 8,000 feet. It's gonna be probably below freezing. I've got very minimal survival gear. It's the afternoon when I crashed, and I'm like, I know what I'm looking at, and if I don't get picked up in the next few hours, I'm probably going to die of exposure that night. And I was just grateful that I survived the crash, and I set out there writing goodbye letters. I wrote goodbye letters to my entire family and friends. I had a little pocket New Testament. I read Psalms 23, and like basically said goodbye to the world, and set out there hoping that someone would find me before dark. And I built signals the best I could on the top of a couple peaks, and had a little bitty signal mirror and was just looking around. There's no plane in sight, like 360 degrees, can't find anybody. And then finally, right before dark, I was able to like signal a plane, which thankfully did turn and rock its wings, and it was out looking for me. And I wasn't on my exact flight path I was supposed to be, so it was kind of a miracle that they found me. They flew off, and then a helicopter right at dark picked me up off the side of the mountain, and I survived and got out of there, and ended up giving my goodbye letters to all my friends and family, because I promised I would say all the things that I never said. When it changes you, like you
Yeah.
realize, like, I was the doofus that never told anyone how I really felt about them. All the people I loved the most. I was really grateful that even if I died, I got this chance to write these letters.
Mm.
And I made this commitment in my heart, like, from now on, I'm not going to be the guy that keeps that inside. Like, I'm going to share my love. I'm going to give those hugs. I'm going to say I love you. And I preach that and teach that everywhere I go. Like don't be the macho man that like leaves that stuff in your heart, because you don't know when that moment's going to come, and you don't have any time anymore. Like, you have no chance to share that. And so try to make it a discipline in your life to share your love, to share your feelings. And I was really bad at that for the first half of my life. And the second half of my life, that's just been kind of blessed to me, that I don't feel like I deserve. That was just kind of given to me by God. Like, I've been trying to do better about that, and be better about being a steward of His love and kindness, and putting myself out there in a more genuine, vulnerable way.
We could end the podcast right there. Holy cow, that is. So did you have to take a break from flying for a while? Like, did it mess you up a little bit? And how long until you were back in the air again?
About 6 months. I
That's
wanted to
impressive.
fly, but it was a huge ordeal. Like the investigation with the FAA and the NTSB and the school was very stressful, and I got my license suspended until they like sorted through the cause of the accident and the crash scene. And you really get kind of persecuted when you uh, wreck a perfectly good airplane, even if it's a accident.
Right.
Um, and so I thought my flying career might be over, but thankfully I did get eventually just a suspension that got removed, and as soon as I was able to fly again, I started flying again, and it was fine. I was a little nervous about going back up, but as soon as I got in the air, it was like all good again, and ended up going on to get my flight instructor ratings, commercial ratings, and then became learned a lot more about mountain flying, and actually instructed in Colorado near where you're at, and kind of taught some mountain flying, and yeah, I've continued to fly into adulthood, and now I have a small plane that's a 6-seater that fits my family of 6 perfect, like a little flying minivan,
Yeah.
and so I'm blessed to be able to like fly for fun now, but it's no longer the career path that I want to go on, but I still love aviation.
Yeah. So when you get done with school, did you just go right into business? Was there a period of time where you're trying to do the pilot thing?
Yeah, kind of. I feel like my life story is like 3 intertwining strands of rope. One is like my Christian faith, and one is my business life, and one is my aviation life. And they kind of wind around each other and each have their moments of kind of when they're on the surface, but they're never gone. They're all like part of my life.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just felt like the Lord told me right when I was about to graduate, like, don't apply for a job. I'm going to open your next door. And that was a hard word for me because, like, I'm a super goal setting, A type planner, and I don't like just surrendering to God and saying, okay, whatever you want me to do, I'm just going to live in the moment and let you decide my next path. But He really needed to test me in that and to say, hey, you can either invent your future or you can trust that I've got a better plan and trust me. And it was super hard because I love creating and planning, but I
So hard to
trusted
do.
him and decided to obey what he said. And then the second I graduated, my phone rang, and sure enough, he opened the next door for me, and it was in the nonprofit world. And I went into sales and marketing job in the nonprofit world in the school system for about 3 years. Um, Traveled and was a public speaker and a marketer for a national school program that was based in Colorado. Around it was called Rachel's Challenge, and it was based on the life of Rachel Scott, who was killed in the Columbine shootings. And just hugely impactful program. Helped launch that nationally, and then was a marketer for them and a speaker for them. That's where I met my wife. Um, we got married there in Colorado, and it was just this really neat season where I felt like I was making a big impact on the world, and but I wasn't really making much money, and I was traveling all the time. And then when I got married, we got pregnant pretty quick, and it was like not going to work with our uh, our public speaking and nonprofit work lifestyle. And so that's when I went on kind of a nationwide job hunt and ended up back in Texas. And that's where I got into commercial aviation insurance. And so I did kind of like this season of sales and marketing jobs where I was just providing for my young family and trying to get established as a grown up with a grown up job. And then did that for a few years, had our second baby, and then kind of just said, man, I was kind of getting too fat and comfortable doing the work for the man thing in the corporate world. I was very successful at it, but I still had this like pull on my heart to do something more and to not just resign myself to this cubicle life that just is the same year repeating over and over until you retire and die. And I just felt like really called to like there's got to be more to life than this, like I really
Right.
like it was like you getting those golden handcuffs almost of comfort. And I realized like I was blessed with this life and I wanted to make something of it, and I didn't want to just be my goal was not just to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Like my biggest fear was always just being normal. Like standing before God one day when he spared me when I could have died at 19, 20 years old, and then him just being like, well, come on into heaven, I guess, but dude, I had way bigger plans for you. You know, like I
Yeah,
had,
yeah, you played small, right? Good
yeah,
job.
yeah. And that's like my biggest fear, I think, is just like not not taking that swing, not jumping when he says jump. Um, and comfort is one of your biggest enemies when you're trying to live a life that's exceptional, that honors God, and like get puts your best talents to work to make the world better, and all this stuff is like you have to fight that
Yep.
temptation to just make it all about you and make it all about your own comfort, and you have to step out of your comfort zone if you're going to level up and make the most of what God gives you.
100%. I mean, I agree that as entrepreneurs, as Christian entrepreneurs, it's our duty to honor God always in all ways, which means you've given me these gifts and these talents, and I need to go like live them out to the fullest. And if I don't, then I'm truly not honoring you always and always, right? With the
Mm-hmm.
gifts that you gave me. I personally think I find a lot of, sometimes I think Christian entrepreneurs specifically, we can talk about this, but they're like afraid sometimes to play big. Like they don't want to go out there and swing for the fences. And I wrestle with that sometimes. Like if you're successful and you have money and you're in business and you're a Christian entrepreneur, like sometimes you get a little bit of a bad rap from the community around you, the Christian community around you. I don't know, maybe that's just my own personal experience, but there's a lot of Christians that play small, and so I don't know why that is. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, but part of this pod is to help inspire people to go play big, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why I struggle at. I feel like I've done really well, obviously, like online on Twitter and other platforms, kind of getting meeting people like you. That I'm like, man, this guy's a lot like me and thinks like me and thinks big and has similar values and is going for it. And I think that's awesome. Like really respect that about you. And it feels like that's one of my favorite things about the internet is
Right.
you can wholeheartedly put yourself out there and you'll attract what you put out. And you have to cast a pretty wide net because in the local church, like I like going to church and my kids like going to church and stuff, but like there may be, even in a church of hundreds of people, there may be zero or one that like get you,
Yeah.
like that are really on the
So
same
right.
wavelength. And
Yep.
when you try to form like all your relationships in that little bubble, you're 99% of people are just not going to get you. And then even if they're well meaning and are trying to like speak into your life, like they're going to either give you bad advice or like contrary to what you know in your heart is what you're supposed to be doing because that's all that they know. They just don't get it. They don't have the same framework or the same grid. And so to me, like the best sharpening and fellowship has come from casting a wide net through the internet and then also finding a local group that was, for me, it's been a group called C12, which is a Christian CEO group
Yep.
that it's kind of like EO or Vistage that is like our CEO roundtable group with a professional leader, and those folks that are CEOs of Christian companies, I feel like are on my wavelength and resonate, and they've just been awesome. It's because internet's great, but there's no substitute for face to face. Like getting around
100%.
people, and so that's been kind of like my local tribe in
Yep.
San Antonio here is like my C12 group, and the friends I've made there have just become brothers and really tight, and they're all going for it, man. They're all like seeing kind of how can I build a great company that makes a great difference in the world that's just not all about me, but it's thinking eternally at the same time, and then do it with no compromise on my on my family or my faith or anything like that. Like, there's just not that many people playing that game. Uh,
No, we need
and
more. We need more Christian entrepreneurs to become very successful.
yeah,
Because if not, then the only example that's out there is, I guess I got to live this other worldly life in order to be successful, right? So
right.
now I have to make a choice between, being this worldly person or living this Christian life. And you and I both agree that you can have both. You can be a great steward of the gifts that God gave you, and you can build this incredible company. You can make a ton of money, and you can use that for good. And you can use it to make impact and
Mm-hmm.
still be a great person.
100%.
Well, so when you finally left the world of sales and marketing, you decided to go into startups, and now you buy businesses and you coach people on buying businesses. So I want to dive into the startup story a little bit, but then I want to talk about why you've gone so deep on the world of business acquisition, and why that might be a better path for most people who kind of sat in our seat where they got family, kids, come from a high income earning job. They're maybe starting a little bit later in life and they want to make that transition. So can we go through that startup story? You got started in I guess was it technology? What were you doing in the world of startups?
My first one was a manufacturing company
Okay.
in the world of the hunting and outdoors world, and it was a really crazy startup. It was we made giant fake trees that you can hide inside for hunting and outdoor use.
Like
It was a wild idea. My friend was the inventor of it and had patents on it, but didn't know how to make it and scale it and build a business out of it. And I was just loved this idea. Um, you probably aren't too familiar being a Colorado guy, but like in Texas, hunting's huge, and 99% of Texas is private land, so there's not much public land
right.
hunting. And so these people have all these big ranches, and then when they're hunting on their ranch, they put blinds up, which are essentially just a big box that you either set on the ground or you set up on a tower, like on stilts, and you just sit in this, usually a plywood or a plastic box, and you hide in a box on your land, and then animals look up and see you in the windows and run off. And it's just kind of dumb. Like, and my friend that invented the tree blind, um, he was a Hollywood set design guy that made stuff for theme parks and movie sets that was like realistic stuff that was made out of foam, like you see at Disneyland or something. You know, when you see like these fake trees that look super realistic, he knew
Yep.
how to make that stuff, and he was a big time hunter. And it just clicked one day, like, why am I sitting in this stupid box when I could just make a freaking tree and hide in a tree, and then the animals would walk right by? And so he had this great idea, and and we ended up kind of figuring out how to manufacture that, make giant trees out of high density closed cell foam with a polyurea coating, which is kind of like a bowling ball material on the outer shell of it. And we would make these hyper realistic trees with doors on them, and then people would set them all over their ranches, and it just looks like a big tree stump. And animals walk right by you; they can't see you, they can't smell you because it's the insulating material. They can't hear you, and it's the ultimate hideout. It was kind of like the Ferrari of hunting blinds, and
Right.
I helped launch that. And really, you know, I was in my 20s. All I knew was how to sell and market. I didn't know anything about business. All I knew was I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I didn't know about the acquiring businesses thing. I just thought, if you want to go into business, you got to start a business at some point. This idea came along and I latched onto it. I got obsessed with it. It was keeping me up at night, kind of trying to figure out this business plan. And I ended up just using my passion and my sales skills to help raise a angel investor that put up the first $500,000 check. And it was just like a Shark Tank kind of deal. Like, looking back, I'm like, that was insane. This dude wrote me and my buddy a $500,000 check for 33% of a company that was pre-revenue, that was just a wild idea with
Right.
neither of us had a manufacturing background. We had no idea what we were doing. We just had like the patents on it and the dream. And we turned that $500,000 into like a small team and a prototype, took it to the national stage to shows, and I came back with a big stack of purchase orders. And then we needed to figure out how to scale up, and then we ended up borrowing another $2 million to help. Like we bought a 68,000 square foot building and retrofitted it from a cabinet maker into a giant fake tree maker, and started building, a manufacturing company. But before I knew that, I'm in my 20s and I've got like $2.5 million of personally guaranteed debt now on a company that's losing money,
Right.
and scaling it as fast as possible to try to just, blitzkrieg the market with this innovative new product. And with an aggressive angel investor behind me saying, every time I had this fork in the road of like, okay, should we just chill out here and try to get profitable, or should we like expand, grow? And he's just like, go, 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 keep going. We've got a limited life on the patents and this thing, and man, your sales are taking off. Don't worry about profits right now. Just worry about growth. But like, I'm a simple man, and I'm like, shouldn't we make money at some point? Like this is really
Like
scary.
basic business 101.
Yeah, and I'm on the hook for all this debt. And
And he's not, right? He's just in it for the equity.
yeah, he's worth, 9 figures. And for him, this was like his fun. Like he made 5 investments that year in angel startups, and we were like his smallest and his just most fun one. And so for him,
Right.
it was like this fun throwaway thing that had a big potential, but he wasn't buying it for cash flow and stuff. And for me, it was like, it's my one source. It's like my only thing. It's my baby. I own like 25% of the company, but I'm PG'd on all the debt, and I've got now 3 kids. And it was stressful, man. It was like super stressful. And
Sounds
then,
about right.
and so, I did this like season of this rocket ship startup ride. Within 18 months, we were at like 50 employees, and we were in 28 states with dealers. I built out the dealer network and was selling these things all over the country. And it was just crazy. And then finally, there was like a little bit of a mutiny at the company. It was wild. Like me and the founder, that was the inventor guy, kind of got crossways about um, a lot of things. But he was the typical mad scientist and didn't know anything about like math and numbers, and I cared about math and numbers and making the business work, and not just.
Right.
And he was kind of like the never say no to spending, live in fantasy land, and I was kind of Mr. Reality at that company, which is funny
Yeah.
because I'm more of a visionary, but like he's way more visionary than me. And so I was like the integrator type role, like
Totally.
the the rubber meets the road guy at this company, which
He's
made
like
me
over
know.
here, like, look at this new leaf I created from this, and you're like,
Yeah, yeah.
how's
So
that
he
going to make
lived
us
in
more
fantasy
money?
land, and I lived in real world land, and we were like oil and water eventually. And the partnership was getting strained, and we were getting good market penetration. And eventually, the founder, the investor that put up all the money, was like, "One of you has to go because this relationship is not working, you guys." And he kind of picked the other guy, and was like, "Clint, like here's a bag of money, go away." And that was my first deal I ever did, was
Right.
like kind of a forced exit. And it was painful because I put like my entire heart and soul into it, um, for 2 years. But I did get a decent bag of money, but it wasn't like I was expecting this multi-million-dollar exit someday because we were growing so quick. And I ended up with like 3 or 400 grand or something, and that's it. And but I got off all the debt, and so I got out clean. And thankfully, like that's probably about the best result that I was going to get, because they stayed in fantasy land for too long and didn't get good rubber meets the road people to replace me,
Hmm.
um, after I left.
Since you
And
were
it
the
ended up,
sales guy, the
yeah, so it
numbers
ended
guy.
up like kind of fizzling out. They sold to private equity. I don't know what the deal was, but within a few years they went out of business after the deal they made with me. So it was like this crazy situation where I was at huge risk. I thought I was going to get a home run my first thing, but I ended up getting a base hit, like a single, maybe a single or a double. But I
Right.
avoided the bad situation, which I think some of my original partners probably didn't get a dime from that. I I don't know exactly, but I timed it okay. Like not really by choice, but it's just how it happened. And then that's
Well,
what
and
brought me into
I was going to say, I just think that's important though for the audience because that's I think the picture that most entrepreneurs have in their mind of like, if I'm going to go start a business, it's going to be just like that. It's like boiler room, stressful. I got to go raise
yeah,
money and got a gun to my head every single day to try to get this thing to an exit and scale it and grow it. And um, we know that's not the case. There's other ways to do it. Time is the great equalizer in a lot of
right.
businesses. So then that could get you out and kicks you into your next startup. Then you decide to go back into the fire.
Yeah, I mean, I fancied myself a little baby angel investor for a little bit because I was like, what if I just so I got pitched on a tech company. I put in like 50 grand of my money into it, and then they were like, it was a company out of Silicon Valley that was trying to basically be a Facebook competitor, but the opposite in terms of values. Like instead of selling all your information and data, they wanted to build it on privacy rails that where
Got
you
it.
owned and controlled your data with no algorithms and no spying and spyware and stuff, and a more honest social media platform. And it was they had Tim Berners-Lee, the founder of the World Wide Web, as an advisor, and Woz as an advisor to this company, and so they had some like huge names behind it and a really good set of values that I really liked. And it was kind of before its time, like the conversations really turned to censorship and all this stuff in the last few years. But this was 10 years ago when nobody was talking about it. These people kind of saw it coming and said we need to have like a platform that's not built on just the whims of one person in terms of, but it is more like governed by a rule of law and a set of rules. And I think it was really before its time. But after I invested, I was just planning on investing and crossing my fingers. Just a little bit of my that was kind of like my fun investment.
Right.
But I didn't have a job yet. I hadn't figured out what I was going to do yet, and I didn't want to go back to a job. And so I was kind of looking for an opportunity. And the guy who was a Silicon Valley CEO that was the the running that tech company was like, Clint, I don't want all the same investors as Facebook because that's going to be like a conflict of interest. And I really want to raise money in middle America and not in like Texas and other places and not just Silicon Valley where I'm going to have investors that are stuck in the same mindset. And so he's like,
That are
could
going
you
to be
help me?
woke.
Yeah. And so it wasn't really woke. It was just like a conflict of interest. If you've got the same investors of your enemies, of your,
Yeah, true. And their thesis is, control the data, monetize everything.
yeah.
It's all about profitability. Who cares about the customer?
Yeah. So I ended up, he was like, hey, do you know anybody else that will invest? And I was like, well, probably, but what's in it for me? And he's like, well, I'll give you more stock if you help me raise some more angel investors like you. And I was like, okay. And so I did a deal with them where I helped raise their first 7-figure round. So I helped them raise 1.2 million within the next like 90 days from a bunch of 50 to $100,000 checks, mostly from folks that
A
knew
lot of
me and my
cats to
story.
herd.
Yeah, and that's like a hard thing to do. So I've now raised 7 figures twice for pre-revenue ideas that were both kind of crazy. Like they were both kind of moonshots in totally different industries. But um, the seeds were planted in that fundraise that eventually turned into my business brokerage company because the most I did eventually raise the round, but the most I was hustling. Like I was working the phones every day trying to raise this money. And the most common objection I got from high net worth people that were like, I was pitching this tech company to was, Clint, this sounds really neat. And I hope you guys succeed, but that's a little too exciting. Like, do you have anything that I could invest in that's just like already making money? Even if the returns aren't as good, like I would rather just invest in something with cash flow. And you hear that a bunch of times from really rich people that you
Yep.
respect and you look up to, and it starts to plant this seed, and the seed starts growing in my mind, and I'm like, man, if that's what all these rich people want, maybe that's what I should want too. Like maybe I should just buy a cash flowing business so I can get off this startup craziness and take care of my family consistently instead of just looking for the next home run swing or the next big hit. And so I started wanting it. And then I remembered all these other rich people told me they wanted it. And then I discovered when I was shopping for a business to buy that it's freaking hard. Like it's hard
Yeah.
to find good
Very
stuff.
fragmented.
Yeah, it's hard to find good stuff, and it's hard to get taken seriously. And so yeah, I kind of just discovered this is a really tough thing, and then the light bulb came on of like maybe someone could do this a little better, and why don't you, Clint, do one more startup and give the rich people what they want and find good companies, to buy and serve them up, and that's how I got into business brokerage, basically.
I love that. Why do you think people should, if you had to sum it up, why should somebody buy a business
Hey, can I
today?
pause it right here?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
we can hit
um,
post editing.
Give me like 2 minutes. I'm gonna send my little buddy, my boy, out the door.
Okay.
I'll be
Sure.
right back.
Okay.
Okay. Jenny, Jet. Hey, did you take your medicine? Yeah, you take some medicine? Y'all have fun. Hey, mate.
Hey, you're good. That's awesome. Is he heading out to camp or something?
He's going to Six Flags today.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, we'll pick up that question where we left off.
Yeah.
Um, if you had to give somebody who's thinking about making the entrepreneurial leap some advice today, right? And they're trying to make the decision between going and buying a business and doing this idea that they have in their mind. Why would you tell them to go buy a business instead of doing the startup?
Yeah, I feel like I did my startup season of life because I didn't know buying a business was a thing I could do, and I didn't really have money. Like when I started the hunting blind business, my net worth was probably negative $30,000. Like I think I had student loans and whatever cash was in my checking account. I owned my car debt free, and I just bought a house with no equity, and that's it. Like so that's my financial life. When you're in that situation in your 20s with kids, you don't think I can buy a business. Like it doesn't cross your mind. You just don't have the awareness that it exists. You don't feel like you've got the capital. It just never crossed my mind, and so I thought you had to do the startup thing, and so that's the road I went. But like in retrospect, I was blessed again. I kind of got lucky. I feel like God spared me from a bad experience yet again because I ended up doing everything I know now makes me realize like what I did was insane. Like
Right.
a manufacturing startup is about the hardest you can choose as a first business foray, like as an entrepreneur. And especially one where you're testing a brand new unproven product and you have to invent the entire manufacturing process step by step as you go because no one knows how to make it. No one knows if the market's going to buy it. You don't know anything about what your costs are going to be. Like everything's just you're making it up as you go. It was extremely risky, but ultimately I knew it was risky, but I did the math of look, I'm a good salesman, I'm selling insurance. My net worth is zero or negative. And I knew I kind of had to just sit in the like, what happens if this thing goes tits up? If I completely screw this up. Okay, I'm going to go from $0 to $0. B, I'm going to go from good credit to bad credit potentially. C, I'm still going to know how to sell stuff and be extremely higher employable if I need to retreat and go take a job again. Like sales skills are always needed. And I
Right.
was good at sales. And so I was like, that was kind of my math. It was super simple, but it was super true. It was like, dude, you might as well take a swing because as long as you don't screw it up with your wife and kids, which is a risk if you get too obsessed on business, right? Is you can
Yep.
screw up the family. I was like, don't screw up the family. Love on them. Give us your best shot, and you're either gonna like. My mind, it was either gonna be like a home run. You're either gonna be super rich, or you're gonna be bankrupt, but you're gonna still be able to like what did you lose? Nothing, because you didn't have anything to lose. You had nothing to lose when you're young and dumb and broke. And so I did it, but I didn't ever do the math that what if I just get a base hit outcome, not a home run or a strikeout, And so I ended up with a
Right.
single, and I ended up on first base, and then I was like, what do I do now? Like this is weird. And that's how I got into this. Was just trying to figure out, going around the bases for me from here on out has been like small business and getting more base hits. And for me, it's been brokering deals, building my own nice small business, and investing in other small businesses along the way. That's been my playbook. But if I could go back in time, I wouldn't necessarily change anything. But if I could give myself advice in my 20s, I'd be like, look, dude, there's another path besides startups that's
Yep.
way less risky, and it's called acquisition entrepreneurship. And I would have told myself to read all the books, which some of them weren't even written at the time, on
Yeah.
acquisition entrepreneurship.
Walker Devil didn't even write that book by the
Yeah,
build
this was
at that
before
point.
that. Yeah. Um, yeah, I started Nature Blinds in 2011, so this book didn't exist yet. Um, but yeah, I would have said, hey, why don't you just stick with insurance, keep getting raises? I was getting raises every year because I was a high producer. And I was like, why don't you just keep in the small house, keep your lifestyle spending down, build a delta with what you're making versus what you're spending, save that money, and that can be your down payment. And then let me teach you about SBA loans and how you can get into business ownership where you're making positive cash flow your first month, and
Yeah.
you have like a step you can take where you actually don't have to take a pay cut. You can get a pay raise when you go into that business, and still have basically unlimited upside, um, without having to just bet the farm on something that statistically only has maybe a 5% chance of success, which is what I did. And I was just one of the lucky that the 5% was me, that I did make it.
Yeah. You were the only guy that made it up. Yeah. I mean, if you just look at the statistics, right, like 80% of startups fail. And if you're
Mhm.
venture backed, maybe that makes you a little bit more, your chances of success are a little bit higher. But most acquisition businesses fail at like a 2% rate. So they're 98% successful. The stats are like there's like 5.3 million new business entities formed every single year. Let's just say half of those are shell companies and sole purpose entities. So it's 2 million people that are all looking to start something new. But there's only 5.9 million employing firms in the entire country. So if there's 2 million a year, not that many of those businesses that are starting up become successful, but there's only like 10,000 small businesses that trade hands every year. And that's just because a lot of people don't know those businesses exist. So you got 2 million people all looking for, what could potentially be a massive opportunity. And they just don't know how to find those markets, which is why you call guys like you and me to say, hey, how do I actually get to the root of that? Like, how do I go find a business to buy? And buying cash flow is such a safer route to go. I think the times when it makes sense to do a startup is when you have a competitive knowledge advantage. Like if you're a software engineer and you can write your own code and you don't have to go raise a bunch of money to go hire engineers, probably like a really good idea. If you're an idea guy, a sales guy who's got to go raise a bunch of money to hire a bunch of software engineers, the risk reward on that is massive. It's like you getting into manufacturing. Like you're taking on a lot of leverage to make that happen. Where you could go buy a business and not even have that much experience. There's a group of mid-level managers in place, and they're pretty much running the company. And you're stepping in as the CEO and optimizing the business using your skill set. Maybe you're a better sales guy or a better marketer or whatever it might be. Now, if you guys haven't listened to the podcast with Ryan Smith from Think SBA, go listen to that. We talk a lot about SBA financing on how you can make this transition work and put very little money down. We're talking, 10%, and sometimes, depending on the seller financing, you might be be able to go even higher leverage than that. But there are tons and tons of cash flowing businesses that are just printing cash that are already proven business models. You don't have to go reinvent the wheel, that you can buy right now as we move into the greatest wealth transfer in history. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but
Yeah,
I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
no, ultimately that's my advice is if you feel the pulling on your heart to leave the employment world and enter the entrepreneurial world, you pretty much have the two choices. You have a choice of doing a startup or you have the choice of buying a business. And either way, you're taking a huge risk. And
Yep.
for me, I took a multi-million dollar risk with a very slim chance of it working, and it worked. But if you're going to take a multi-million dollar risk, like it's better to do it in a way that the odds are stacked in your favor than stacked against you. And that's what acquisition entrepreneurship's all about.
Yep.
Ultimately, I think you just have to get comfortable with that basic math. Even if acquisition entrepreneurship is safer, it's still not safe. Like it's still risky. And I don't want to give the impression that it's a sure thing because it's not. But if you can sit in that math like I did and say, even if I screw this up and go bust, can I keep my integrity? Can I keep my family? Can I keep eating? And we just live in the most blessed world as Americans. That's like it's really hard to starve to death in our country. It's really hard
Right.
to, like even if you can't pay your SBA loan back and go bankrupt or something like that, if you've got enough skills to get into that SBA loan, you have enough skills to feed your family and get a job. And like if you have to. And part of what I think makes me different is just that near death experience part of my life where I'm like, this is all this stuff is temporary anyways. Like
Right.
you might as well try, like you might as well go for it. And I think there's a time to be a little bit more on defense, and stuff like that. But when you're in your 20s and 30s, maybe 40s, and you haven't amassed much to lose yet wealth wise, and you feel like you've got a calling to do business, like acquisition entrepreneurship through the SBA loan program is like, it feels like with everything I know now, like almost a no brainer. I would only tell people to do a startup if you feel like, yeah, you've got the advantage like you discussed, where you can do it with code or very cheaply with big upside with very little risk. Or if it's just feeling like God's speaking to you, like like you've got this unique idea that feels like a calling, and there's no, you feel like you have to do it. Like you're going to get to 80 years old on your deathbed and feel like I will regret it if I don't try this. And it starts to feel like more of a I got to listen to God thing, like a spiritual thing or a calling thing. And it's so unique that you can't buy a business that does it, and you feel like you're being told that this is what the world needs right now. Like I always kind of my number one advice is always like listen to God and do what He says. And so I never want to say
Amen.
never. Like I never want to say you're an idiot if you do a startup, and you're only smart if you do an acquisition because of the risk reward. So ultimately, listen to God and do what He says. And if He's telling you to do a startup, listen to Him. But if it's just kind of like, how can I become a business owner and set myself up for success and create some leverage to level up in my life, like the acquisition path logically just makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think the other thing about startups is, just because you have the idea, like really investigate it too. Make sure you dig into it and spend some time discerning whether or not it's what you're supposed to do. Let it percolate for a while. I see a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people get an idea and then they just leap. But when you talk with really successful startup founders, this isn't an idea that was born yesterday. Like they've been percolating on these things for years and years, and they have some unique perspective or experience that has put them in this situation. And then they decide to go do it. That those people far and away are the most successful in the startup world. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely, people out there swinging for the fences, buying crypto and doing crazy stuff like that. But that's not really entrepreneurship. That's not business. That's gambling. So don't gamble on it. Like percolate on it and invest the time into it, and then weigh those costs. Right? Are you chasing building this revolutionary product, or are you chasing freedom? If you're chasing
Yeah.
freedom, then business acquisition is probably the fastest path from point A to point B.
Yeah.
Not startup. That's a 80, 90 hour grind sometimes, when you're really trying to get the rock up the hill. So, well, as we're kind of coming to the end of this, what's keeping you awake right now? I mean, we got a lot of things changing in the world of business, economics. There's a standoff definitely between buyers and sellers on price as rates continue to go up. We're seeing deals kind of stall as a byproduct of that. But good, bad, or indifferent, what are you thinking about that gets you excited, or is maybe a puzzle you're trying to solve?
I mean, for me, it's kind of a niche thing, but I've been doing sell side advisory for about 8 years. And I feel like my heart has really landed with buyers. And it's part of it's through these online communities that I'm a part of. So, like my Twitter and Facebook world is dominated by business buyers. A lot of my best friends in this space are all business buyers and serial buyers. I call them whale sharks. That's another kind of topic, but um, that I feel like there's a path forward for my company that is going to be transitioning to how can I um, kind of create a dual mandate of not just because for the past 8 years it's been about like how can I make this easy for buyers and sellers, but focusing on sellers. Like if I can find the good deals, get them to a realistic price point and package it up right, then there's always going to be buyers that are going to be willing to buy it if you can
Right.
find and package up a good deal. And I've done that, and that's great. But I've realized like I'm about probably 1,000 to 1 of buyers that want my services versus sellers that want my services, and and that's the big question keeping me up right now is like, how can I serve the 999 that weren't able to close a deal with my firm, um, but are genuine and sincere and want to approach this path. And so a lot of what I'm doing right now is pioneering. So I've got a great team led by Dusty and Alyssa and Mike in Texas that are um, we're doing sell side advisory still. It's going strong. We always have probably at least 10 or so deals we're working on at any given time where we're representing the seller to the market. But I'm moving myself out of sell side advisory and I'm starting to pioneer to buy side programs. And that's where I really feel like my heart's being pulled is can I scale buy side services to scale to a much bigger level, go more national, and help buyers and every this is against conventional wisdom because every broker that's like an experienced broker you talk to is like stay away from buy side work, they'll waste all your time, money's on exclusive sell side engagements, that's where you make your money. Buyers are just tire kickers, they're going to run you ragged and waste all your time. I hear that a million times, but I can't help, I'm just a glutton for punishment when everybody in the industry is all saying the same thing. I'm like, what if there's an what if everyone's wrong and what if there is a way, and so that's
Yep.
the thing that's keeping me up at night. And so I'm pioneering two programs right now. One's a buy side advisory called Buyer Sherpa that helps people that have found a business they want to buy, but they want someone to navigate them with that deal and help them analyze it, negotiate it, close it, just kind of have somebody on their side of the table as a buyer and kind of creating some innovative um, fee structures to that. So it's not real expensive to get an advisor and it's kind of a milestone based on how far you get up that mountain and with a success fee at the end. Um, just to kind of have somebody on their side of the table for once, because I think buyers are at a big disadvantage most of the time versus the seller, which knows everything about the business, and the
Right.
broker, which has done hundreds of deals, and there's a buyer with no experience and nobody on your side of the table. I want to kind of turn the tables and get experienced deal people on their side of the table and create a program for that. And then the biggest one that's exciting for me right now is a search program. And that's probably the most universal problem among business buyers is like, how do I find a deal? How do I find my company to buy? And
Yep.
that's the most common thing I get asked is like, I looked on Biz by Sell and I couldn't find anything. Like there's all this junk and I couldn't find anything that fit my appetite. And I just look over and over there and I can't find anything. And then when I do find something, someone else buys it before I can. And there's just a tremendous need for like you have the searchers that their full time job is searching, and some of these people will have a 2 year search fuse to where they've raised a traditional search fund or whatever, and they still don't always find a business to buy when they've got 2 years full time
Yep.
dedicated to this. Like they still don't always find their deal and get it done. But how is an average Joe that has a job that's part time searching? Sometimes their search can go indefinitely. It can go 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and they still have never been able to close on a deal because the biggest problem is they can't find one. And so they don't have time to run a proprietary search full time. And they're just hoping that a broker deal falls into their lap that's perfect and that's not going to meet the demand. Um,
Yep.
and so I'm trying to develop like a basically a proprietary search as a service offering, and we're calling that Search for You program. And so that's in beta right now. We're running a few clients through it, but that's something I think could scale and help solve one of the biggest needs in this industry right now is how do we get more of the buyers that are like the normal people holding down families and jobs that are serious about buying but don't have time to run a full-time search. Can
Yep.
we fractionalize kind of like a search as a service program and run searches on their behalf? And that's a nut that I've been trying to crack for this past year, and I think we're close to that and starting to get some good results with our guinea pig clients right now. So those
That's
are the two
awesome.
things that I feel like this is kind of unique to me, but it's just like where my heart's at. I've always loved buyers, and can I serve buyers at scale is like my next big question. And I've always feel like I've got to give myself a big challenge because if I don't, I was running the risk. To be honest, like a year or two ago, I was thinking about leaving the industry because I was getting bored.
Mm.
Anytime you are doing the same thing over and over again, which was I was getting comfortable and successful doing sell side advisory. Like I said, if I don't stand before God one day and feel like I was going all out and I really went for it, then I feel like I'm almost in sin or like I'm doing wrong. And I
Yep.
started to get there after 6, 7 years of sell side advisory, where I was like, okay, I'm just repeating the same year over and over again. I need to innovate or I'm going to die. And like buy side is where my heart's been tugging me. So that's where I feel like I'm going now.
No, I think it's good. I mean, there's also a reason why the fastest growing MBA programs at all the top 5 B schools are entrepreneurship through acquisition, because there's just a massive wave of opportunity. And we kind of talked about it earlier, but only 10,000 businesses really trade hands a year. And it's really just because the business owners don't really know how to sell. 58% of them don't even have a legacy or transition plan. So it's knowing where to look and how to find that and piece that puzzle together for somebody. But you're right, it's expensive. I mean, you're going to pay a retainer typically, and you're going to be responsible. You're going to typically be on the hook for the commission if the
Mm-hmm.
seller doesn't want to pay it. It's a challenging problem to solve. So I'm excited to see that evolve for you, and see the buyer Sherpa program take off. Last question: what do you think the difference is between entrepreneurs who are successful and those who give up, quit, or never get started?
I think I think it's like you got to be dumb enough to try at some point. Like part of entrepreneurship, and it even applies to acquisition entrepreneurship. I don't want you to feel like by buying an established business that you just walk into this well-oiled machine and just make
No
sure that
problems. Yeah,
you
ever.
wind the clock every night and it just keeps running. Like it's you're still a legit entrepreneur if you buy your way
Right.
into a business versus a startup. There's all the stress, all the effort. You still have to put your whole heart into it, and at some point you've got to say, this is good enough. I'm going to take the leap and bet on myself. And I think the biggest difference between the entrepreneurs, the wannabes, versus the true entrepreneurs that do it is they realize they can never get to the perfect risk free sure thing scenario, but they get like enough ducks in a row that they think they've got a decent chance, and they just say, and then it's going to be up to me to make this work. And it's that attitude of betting on yourself that I think is the most important thing in entrepreneurship. Just committing to doing whatever it takes, learning whatever you need to learn, rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty. Like those are the people that make it, and the people that just live in hypotheticals and spreadsheets and want to just cleverly orchestrate and engineer the perfect thing that's going to be all upside and no downside. They're going to sit on the sidelines forever because it's just kind of a pipe dream that it's ever going to be that perfect. And that's what I would tell the buying community is like, know what your non-negotiables are, but make that a very small list, and then be very flexible on everything else. And at some point say that's good enough, and bet on yourself. And that's how you're going to get in the game. And that's how you're ultimately going to win is, is betting on yourself, not viewing these investments as like things you're buying. Like view them as an
Yeah.
opportunity that you're seizing.
Yeah. I think the key word in what you said is the game. Get in the game. It's a game.
Yeah.
It's made to be played, right? And entrepreneurs like the game. We like the game. That I don't watch sports. I don't attend sporting events. I don't do any of that. I just love the game of business. It's incredibly exciting and fun to me, and a challenging problem to solve. So if people really connected with your story, they want to follow you on social media, maybe shoot you a DM or something like that. What are the best channels that they can do that on?
I'm on most of the platforms just under my name, Clint Fiore, ClintFiore. And my company name's Bison Business. We're bisonbusiness.com. And we'd love to hear from you in a business context or a personal context. But yeah, I'm just going to be out there sharing what I learn as I go, and uh, I try to make memes and make people laugh sometimes, and but also mix in a lot of good educational content. Um, and but yeah, love to connect with you, and you can find me anywhere.
Clint, man, we appreciate you coming on. We'll put all of those contacts in the show notes. And until next time, or maybe the next time you're in Colorado, we'll talk soon, buddy. Appreciate you.
Yeah, man, I'll come out and see you. I'm in Colorado once or twice a year, so I'll come say hi next time I'm out there.
Yeah, I can't wait. We'll have you up to the studio. We'll go out to lunch. Maybe even go up, take me up in the air a little bit too. I'm not a pilot, but I do enjoy a good flight. So
Let's go, man.
let's do it. All right, man.
All right,
Talk soon. See ya.
we'll see you.